Demetrius Andrade scores a 12th round unanimous decision over, I'm going to skip his first name and just, call him by his surname, Sulecki. Right? So Andrade defeats Sulecki on a 12th round decision. Now, I thought this was a very good performance by Demetrius Andrade. He didn't lose a round. I've seen some people criticizing the performance. I don't know what people are looking at, to be honest with you. A guy didn't lose a round, puts on an absolute shutout, and you're criticizing it. Sulecki is a good fighter. Sulecki is a guy who gave Danny Jacobs lots of problems. I thought the scorecards in the Danny Jacobs fight were a bit of a joke, to be honest. And I said that at the time. I said this Sulecki-Jacobs fight was a lot closer than the judges had it. He gave Jacobs lots of problems and he was outboxing Jacobs for periods throughout that fight. I'm not saying Jacobs didn't win. That knockdown was, in my opinion, very important for him. That late knockdown that Jacobs scored. So Sulecki is a useful operator. I'm not saying he's elite, but he's a useful operator. Definitely was competitive against Danny Jacobs, but he wasn't competitive here against Demetrius Andrade. Now, some people are criticizing how wild Andrade was, particularly early in the fight. Yeah, he was a little wild at times, but that's because he was trying to knock Sulecki out. He was going for the highlight reel KO. That's what he was doing. Andrade is not going to do that against a Canelo Alvarez or a Gennady Golovkin. He's not going to come out in the first round and go looking for a highlight reel KO. He knows who he's up against. He knew against Sulecki that he wasn't up against an elite counterpuncher like Canelo or an elite power puncher like Golovkin. He knew that he could take certain liberties against Sulecki, and that's what he did. And even with all those liberties that he took, he still didn't lose a round. I've been saying for many, many years that Andrade is a special talent. I remember way back in the Floyd Mayweather era, when Mayweather, had a few fights at 154 and people were talking about who they think could beat Mayweather, I said Andrade is a guy who I'd pick over Mayweather. And Andrade was little known at the time. So I rate Andrade highly. I know there's the Billy Joe Saunders crowd who are criticizing him. What on earth are you criticizing? Billy Joe had the opportunity to fight Andrade twice. First time he failed a drug test. Second time he elected to, turn the opportunity down, move up to 160 pounds, 68 pounds. They're at 160. Move up to 168 pounds, the weight division above, and take on an unknown fighter for a vacant belt, which is the very thing that Billy Joe and his fans criticized Andrade for doing. However, when Andrade did it, it wasn't his choice. He had to fight an unknown guy for a vacant belt because Billy Joe failed a drug test. Then when Billy Joe had the opportunity as Andrade's mandatory to fight Andrade and get that belt back, what happened to him? Where did he go? He went and did the very thing that all the Billy Joe fans were criticizing Andrade for doing, but this time it was Billy's choice. He did have a choice, stepping up to 168, taking on an unknown guy for a vacant belt. So he had his opportunity. He chose to go in a different direction. You can't criticize Andrade for that. Andrade, a very good talent, fast, tall, does have some decent power there. He's certainly not a puncher on the level of a Golovkin or anything like that, but he does have some decent power there in the left hand. In fact, he thought he was Adonis Stevenson for the first couple rounds, though he was letting that left hand go. And he was fighting a lot more square on in this fight as well, which is one thing I noticed. Most Andrade fights, he fights a lot more side on, but in this fight, he was fighting more square on. And I have to big up the hometown crowd of Andrade's here. I believe the venue is called the Dunkin' Donut Center in Providence, Rhode Island. That was a fantastic atmosphere. I mean, it's very rare, unfortunately, these days. It's very rare in American boxing to see that kind of atmosphere for a fight. It really did harken back to the days when Vinny Pazienza was fighting in Rhode Island. They say it was something like 25 years ago. Yeah, I remember when Vinny Pazienza was fighting them times, showing my age. But yeah, fantastic atmosphere and really something that Andrade and Matchroom can build on. This kind of atmosphere. They need to be having all Andrade's fights at the Dunkin' Donut Center or, wherever the biggest arena is in that particular part of the United States. They need to be having all his fights there, unless he's fighting a Canelo or maybe even a Golovkin, because they, you know, those fights are probably too big for Rhode Island. They're going to be Vegas fights more than likely, or, you know, wherever Canelo wants it, basically. But unless he's fighting those guys, they need to set up shop in Providence, Rhode Island, and always have the fights there, because the crowd is just fantastic and energy flows where attention goes. All right. So the more his local community come out to support his fights, the more buzz that's going to create in that particular, you know, city. And that buzz will then reverberate around the country. People will be drawn to that buzz. Who's this guy that they're ranting and raving about in Providence, Rhode Island? This Demetrius Andrade guy, this boo-boo. Who is this? You know, he's causing a lot of noise. We're hearing a lot of noise coming out of Providence, Rhode Island about this guy. People, you know, showing up in their thousands to these arenas and stuff like that to watch him. So they need to set up shop and build something kind of similar to what Terence Crawford has built for himself in Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, they need to do something similar with Demetrius Andrade in Providence, Rhode Island. So yeah, definitely very impressed by the crowd and their passionate support of their hometown hero. And it wasn't a sellout, apparently. It was like, I think they sold just over 7,000 tickets, something like that. And the capacity is 9,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. So hopefully his next fight, they'll be able to sell those extra tickets, especially if it's against a more well-known opponent. So yeah, Demetrius Andrade, I thought he was a great performance. I think he's a very live and dangerous fighter for anybody at 160 pounds, be it Canelo, be it Gennady Golovkin, whoever. Very, very dangerous fight for any of them. The fact that he's on DAZN, you would imagine, should make those fights easier to make. But you look at Canelo and you think, well, he's looking at Kovalev, he's looking at legacy. Does he really care that much about being undisputed? You see, Golovkin was such a big deal, was such a big name, that Canelo knew he had to fight him because it was the elephant in the room. Golovkin at the time had all these belts and this prestige, and he was the killer of the division. He knew he had to fight him. But with Demetrius Andrade outside of Providence, Rhode Island, nobody really knows him. So there's no real pressure on Canelo to fight this guy. It's kind of similar to when Billy Joe held the WBO belt. There was no real pressure on Canelo to fight him because nobody knew him in the United States. Billy Joe Saunders I'm talking about. So Andrade's really going to have, you know, several fights there in Providence, really drum up some support. And of course, if he gets big enough in Providence that he can start headlining shows in Vegas, then he needs to do that too. That's a way to really put pressure on Canelo to make the fight. And as far as Golovkin, you know, you would imagine that Golovkin should want to fight Demetrius Andrade, and maybe he will. But at this stage of Golovkin's career, I have to imagine that this is the point where he's not going to want to take that many risks because he's signed this long-term deal with DAZN. He's an older fighter. He's slowing down. You know, he's going to look at somebody like an Andrade and think, I don't want this guy boxing circles around me, you know, forcing me to chase him around the ring and, you know, me getting hit with a load of shots and maybe losing on points. I mean, he lost to Canelo on points, right? He went the distance in those fights. He went the distance against Danny Jacobs. So in his head and in the minds of his people, they might be thinking, you know what, there's a good chance that Andrade might be able to stick and move for 12 rounds as well. And at 37, 38, whatever Golovkin is, maybe that's not the kind of fight he wants. Maybe he's more interested in fighting somebody who's actually going to stand with him. Maybe a Charlo. You know, Charlo would stand with him. So I don't know how realistic it is for Andrade to be getting the Golovkin or Canelo fights right now. He needs to turn up the temperature. That's what he needs to do. He needs to become a star in his own right. And once he becomes a star in his own right, then he might be able to get those fights. So, and you know, as far as Charlo fighting Andrade, I'm not sure if Charlo's daddy, Al Heyman, will even let him come out to play, to be honest with you. Because Charlo's over there with that PBC weirdness. And look, I've bigged up PBC for many, many years. But let's be real, when it comes to this cultish behavior where they don't like fighting anybody outside of their own circle, At least not when it comes to their stars. They obviously let Andy Ruiz out, but Andy Ruiz was a new signing and he wasn't one of their stars. You know, when it comes to their stars, you know, the Charlos, the Errol Spencers, the Wilders, they don't like letting people from outside their circle come in and challenge their stars. Not unless it's some gimme fight. Yeah, or a fight which they think is a gimme fight. When it's an actual dangerous, serious threat that they're concerned about, they don't like letting them guys come in. You know, and now you've got this ridiculous situation where Jamal Charlo is, you know, out in the wilderness, basically a middleweight, because all the belts are on DAZN, and this guy's still acting as though, you know, he's not interested in fighting on DAZN. I mean, what's this guy's issue? I know they're talking about, or maybe they have now made him WBC regular champion, and then Canelo is the, what's he called now? Franchise champion. Maybe that's a way of the WBC appeasing Al Heyman. You know, because Al Heyman does have very strong ties to the WBC. Maybe that's the WBC throwing Al Heyman a bone to try and help break this DAZN monopoly on the middleweight division. I don't know. But still, somebody like Charlo, if he had any sense in his head, he'd realize, you know what? Either I have to force Al Heyman to make a fight on DAZN for me. Let me go and fight on DAZN for one fight to challenge Golovkin or Andrade or Canelo. Allow me to do that. Or I just need to go and sign with DAZN. Go sign with Golden Boy or go sign with Matchroom and fight on DAZN. You know? There's no room in boxing for this misplaced sense of loyalty when it comes to the boxers. You've only got a very finite amount of time to make life-changing sums of money. You have to be selfish, you know? You can be generous outside of the arena of boxing, in the community. Do you understand? But when it comes to your actual boxing career, man, you need to be selfish. So, anyway, I thought it was a very good performance by Demetrius Andrade. I think he's a problem for anybody at 160 pounds. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening, I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.